I'm planning to use CoCo Cortex code to build an entire end-to-end pipeline that includes generating some fake data using snowpipe streaming and inserting the data into a raw table, then use a dynamic table for declarative pipelines to auto refresh whenever the data gets loaded into raw table, and finally create a view for dashboards where I want to see the performance of a particular product by each day, which product is performing better each day, um, so that a customer or companies can analyze the details and improve their business. So I'm going to give the prompt in natural language to Cortex Code, which is the AI coding assistant from Snowflake. But before I do that, I want to first list what are the databases available in my Snowflake account, which is a trail account. So here I have orders, retail, and some of the default Snowflake learning databases. But now I'm going to create a products DB using CoCo. So I'll go to the VS Code and then prompt for Cortex to initiate the connection for CoCo. When I do that, it is saying this project contains configuration that Cortex code will load and execute automatically. Settings may define hooks, MCP servers, and plugins that run commands on your machine without additional prompts. Okay, I'll say yes to proceed. And at the same time, before I give my natural prompt of building that end-to-end pipeline, I'll also explore if there is an option to bypass um, the responses that I'm going to give, which means I wanted it to auto approve so that I don't have to give any prompt again, so that the CoCo is going to build the entire pipeline for me. So, okay, there is a skill called bypass here, which enable bypass safeguards mode, which is auto approve all tool calls. So I'm going to bypass for auto approval. So now the bypass safeguard mode is enabled. All tools calls will be auto approved without confirmation. So I don't have to say yes or proceed further in this particular demo. So let me give a natural prompt, natural language prompt like um, create products database in my demo account, in my trail account. I have the account name that includes a table in raw schema and a dynamic table in transformation schema or in analytics schema, and a view to report so products database, right? And a view. So before I say that to create a product database, I'll also so saying that includes a table. I will say a products table, a product table of a retail company in raw schema, so it will understand what are the columns that are needed for the product table in the retail company, and a dynamic table in analytics, and a view to report the performance of products by date, right? So we'll understand which product is performing better in a particular date, which means which product is being sold most and which product is generating highest revenue. So I'm going to say use faker to generate fake data and make sure to use snowpipe streaming, um, high performance architecture to ingest the data into Snowflake raw table by reading the fake data, right? I'm asking um, to use Snowpipe Streaming V2, which is high performance architecture, uh, V2 streaming offering that Snowflake is providing. So I have the details handy here. I'm asking you to create a database and tables in raw schema and analytics schema. The raw schema table will have the data that is loaded through Snowpipe Streaming V2, and it's a fake data. And dynamic table is created. I'll say auto target lag of the dynamic table. I want to refresh the dynamic table every 1 minute and refresh dynamic table every 1 minute. What I'm saying here is dynamic table is a declarative pipeline from Snowflake. It will have an inbuilt query underneath. It is just like any DBT or other transformation engines where it will do all the transformation operations, and you also provide the target lag, which means a particular schedule will be defined. So whenever there is a change in the source, you will see that the refresh happens for the interval that we provide in the dynamic table. So target lag 1 minute, meaning every 1 minute it will refresh to make sure that the fresh data comes into um, the data that is refreshed in raw will be refreshed in dynamic table. I'm also going to say generate the data for 5 minutes in raw table and ingest using snowpipe streaming high performance architecture. So this is the prompt that I'm giving. I'll quickly read one more time. So I'm saying, oops, okay. So I'm saying create a dynamic table in analytics schema and create a raw table in raw schema. Create a products database, right? Use snowpipe streaming to ingest some fake data, right? And then use a dynamic table that will be used as a declarative pipeline to refresh the data every 1 minute, and then keep the data ready in a view so that I can use it for analytics. Let's see if Cortex can do. And I also enabled bypass safeguards so that it won't prompt me again, and it's gonna build entire pipeline in my trail account. I'm going to say enter. So let us see what CoCo will do for me. So in this case, it is currently reading its skills. I'll plan this out before implementing as it involves multiple components across database setup, data generation, NoPipe streaming ingestion, dynamic tables, and views. So it is trying to read the skills that are needed to develop this pipeline. So right now, it is doing all the prerequisites and running in a plan mode. When it is running in a plan mode, it is going to just use the corresponding um, the plan that it needs to perform step by step. So in this case, it has to create a database, a schema, the tables, and run all the DDLs there, and create a Python script that uses the faker to generate the fake data, and also uses Snowpipe Streaming SDK, which is the Python streaming SDK for Python for Snowpipe streaming, and then uses the Snowpipe streaming to read the faker data that is generated and ingest into Snowflake. So to do that internally, it has to use some pipes, channels that it has to plan. So if I have to build this project manually, I would definitely think that it will take about a couple of days, because how to come up with a data model, how to come up with a Python script that has the snowpipe streaming SDK, how to generate the fake data, and then I have to think of creating the corresponding tables and databases, and finally views. So this will take a lot of time. So in this case, CoCo is helping me to build with my prompt that I have given in my natural language. So let's see, it is trying now. It is able to, I think, find the snowpipe streaming 1.2.0 version available, and it is now trying to fetch the Python example code from GitHub repository that it has. It is using the skills that are available, and then it is, while it is trying to fetch, it is also saying HTTP 404 not found, which means if it doesn't find, it will go and figure out if the skill is available in some subdirectories. Now it is able to check the Snowflake connection details and authentication method. So I have my details provided in the connections.toml that it's going to use. It's going to refer the account that I've given. So right now it has established, there is a trail RSA key that I have already established, but it is trying to validate whether the key pair authentication is in place. If it doesn't, it will help me to fix that as well. So interestingly, it is currently checking the connection is available, and it is also checking the list of warehouses. It's going to use one of the default warehouse, compute underscore warehouse, which is an extra small size. And right now it generated all the plan. Would you like cortex to proceed with this plan? Of course, I wanted it to proceed with the plan. I'll say yes here. So the plan is in place, and it is asking me whether should I proceed. All I gave is just one click of yes, so that it is asking me to just go over the plan if CoCo, whatever the plan that is generated, is accurate. So it is currently generating an RSA key pair for Snowpipe Streaming SDK, which is important, so that it can interactively communicate without having to do with passwords provided manually. So it is generating an RSA key and then trying to execute that um, key update in the Snowflake trial account. And now, based on the plan, it is installing Snowpipe streaming uh, package, and then it created the databases and the schemas, corresponding schemas. The table is created. Now it is trying to execute the script that says create streaming pipe for high performance ingestion, and the pipe, which is product streaming pipe, is available, and an execute script is creating a dynamic table with 1 minute refresh lag. So it is currently creating a view for product performance by date. Everything I've given in one prompt in the very beginning. Right now it is creating profile.json, which is needed for SDK authentication. When you use Snowpipe streaming, it needs a profile.json file that it can use to communicate between the source to the Snowflake account. So typically you create Python program in your local machine or in your cloud VM where you run your application, and from that Python program you connect to source. In this case I'm using faker data, and then connect to the destination. No pipe streaming under the hood uses channels and pipes to do the parallel processing, and it is a server, it uses the serverless virtual warehouse. uh, so let's see error. There is something called, let me check the initial output after few seconds. So it is trying to do all the operations now. High performance architecture, docs by default, pipe naming convention, it is picking up from the skills. and then it is reading ingest underscore products.py. It created the file is just the script that it created is not malicious, so it is also trying to validate if there is any security risk with the the program that it has created. Now let's see if it is in few seconds. Check if the channel opens successfully this time. So it is initializing. It is taking a bit longer. It is waiting for 15 seconds and then waiting. So it is trying to use an SDK that initializes the Rust core and authentication. So while it is doing, we'll go and check whether it executed. So I'm going to go to the Explorer in place of so here I have a database explorer. So this is the product database that it just created, and then it has a raw schema with product table, right? And if you take a look at, it has some data that is inserted, and then you also need pipes when you use snowpipe streaming. So there is a pipe object created, product siphon streaming. And then let's go to the analytics schema under the products database. I have a dynamic table that is created. Let's see if the data is populated here. So I see the data is populated here. So if you go to the refresh history, so it is running. The refresh lag is 1 minute target lag, but the refresh time interval within 51 seconds, I think 1.4 seconds, it was able to refresh for any changes that are there in the source table. And so let us see, under the views I have uh, these columns that are created: average product price, average revenue per product, sales date, top category by revenue. So these are important fields for decision making, which products they wanted to, which product is performing well in a particular day, so that they can increase the number of products, so that they'll continue to sell those products, or they can also analyze which products are performing, which products are not performing good, so they'll plan the decisions of marketing accordingly. So I'll go to the linear section of this particular dynamic table and see this dynamic table is the source and the target is the view. And when it comes to when I click on the dynamic table here, looked at the data quality. The data quality, generally you have, okay, so here the default data quality checks are there. For the product ID, there is no null count, so null information is 0. Product name, so there are no null records, right? So it is able to give some information related to uh, some of the products and different data values coming out of that, right? In the sales date, some dates are there. So it is providing data quality checks. Let's see the lineage of this particular view. So it is saying the source is dynamic table and the target is a view. For the dynamic table, if I go to the lineage, let's see if I have any lineage here for the dynamic table. So under the graph, it says it picked up the products table from the raw schema and then refreshing the products performance. Let's go back and check what CoCo is doing for us. So it is saying excellent. Ingestion is running smoothly at about 100 rows per second with consistent commits. Let me verify data is landing in Snowflake while ingestion continues. So take a look at this one. So here I have 14,750 records ingested, and then it just gave a sample rows from the raw products table, which is a summary of what we are trying to achieve. And then it executed the refresh status on the dynamic table it created on a particular time, and the name of the table and the database and the schema. And then the dynamic table has now 8,200 rows already, and it is in incremental refresh mode with active schedule. Let me now wait for the remaining ingestion time and then do final verification. So because in the very beginning I mentioned just run it for 5 minutes. So it's going to just ingest the data for 5 minutes using Faker with the help of Snowpipe streaming high performance architecture that uses the appropriate packages from uh, the Snowflake, and it is going to ingest the data. So let's say it is currently generating 22,500 records ingested, about 60 seconds remaining. Let me wait for the completion. While you do that, you can also check the real-time performance here and you click on the data. So you have a refresh history. So in this history, it is able to uh, show us that it has refreshed 3 times so far because I put a lag of 1 minute, and then it is using warehouse used only, so it is using compute warehouse. The current lag is 27 seconds, but actually I provided a target lag of 1 minute, but it is able to refresh within 27 seconds. And so it is providing nice metrics here. It is providing a graph to show the lineage and also the log metrics and corresponding definition. So create table, dynamic table definition is provided here. Create or replace dynamic table, uh, the products analytics products performance is the dynamic table name. We closely observe the definition of dynamic table. There is a target lag 1 minute which is defined. Refresh mode is auto. Initialize is on create and warehouse is compute. So it is needing a refresh time interval, and then it is looking for a warehouse to use that. And I have a query here that says read from the raw product group by on the product ID, product name, category, brand, and sale date. So you have some aggregated data on the dynamic table, but the final view is going to pull the accurate information or the metric information from the dynamic table. So this is how a dynamic table is created. It's a declarative way of defining um, a table where it can perform the transformation operations without a third party tool like the DBT or any other ETL processing tools. So you have under the hood, when you say target lag 1 minute, it would use some scheduler. In Snowflake terminology it is TAS. So you have a view created, go to the data preview and then check for a particular day unique products sold and the total quantity sold, the total revenue, right? And so average product price, total performance, top category by revenue. So all of these metrics are useful for companies to analyze which products are performing better on a particular day and what they can do to improve their the product performance or their revenue growth. So let's go back to the CoCo and see. So here it is saying the default pipe was automatically created and is marked as streaming kind with so all dynamic table refreshes succeeded with incremental refresh mode running every 48 seconds with the 1 minute target lag. Let me mark the final task complete. So once it is complete, we are going to end the session, but let it continue because I mentioned 5 minutes on the very beginning to generate. So what it is trying to verify is now the data is generated in the source. The dynamic table, it is ensuring that all the data that is available in the source is actually refreshed. So now finally it gave me a nice summary card that says, I'll quickly go over this one. So everything is up to date and verified. Here is a summary of what was built. In this architecture, it used a fake data, and used the Snowpipe streaming SDK, a high performance architecture, and then inserted the data into the products table in raw schema. So then it developed a dynamic table with 1 minute refresh target lag. So and then the product, so it created dynamic table product underscore performance. Finally, a view is created on top of the product performance So that will give the performance of products by date. So the objects created in Snowflake are the products database, raw schema, analytics schema, and the products table. The product hyphen streaming is a default pipe that is needed for snowpipe streaming, and product performance is dynamic table 1 minute lag, and product performance by date, which is a view. So ingestion results, it has generated about 28,050 rows streamed via snowpipe streaming high performance architecture over 5 minutes, and it used the snowpipe streaming Python SDK with key pair authentication. A default pipe product streaming was auto created by the Snowflake. Dynamic table performed 10 incremental refreshes because we have provided a target lag of 1 minute, and so it's going to refresh every time it sees a change, but a lag of 1 minute is expected, but it can do before 1 minute for bringing the fresh data to the transformation table. What are the files created? Ingest underscore product dot py, the faker data generator plus snowpipe streaming ingest script. Profile.json, that is useful for SDK authentication configuration. It uses the key pair authentication. And then it also generated RSA key and RSA public key. It is needed for communication between your local system to Snowflake for connection via the snowpipe streaming Python package. And see some key metrics. You have a raw table rows with 33,650. Dynamic table has so so as of 5 minutes, because I wanted it to run only for 5 minutes. So the final table has 26,250. Date range is given like February to March 27th. The categories it has generated in faker data is 10 of them. There are 5 regions. Refresh mode is incremental by default. Refresh interval is 48 seconds and on average, which means although I have defined a target lag of 1 minute, but the refresh is within that 1 minute it is able to do, and the max lag it can see is 1 minute. So this is the end-to-end flow, and there are some final metrics in a report card and the ingestion summary. So with that, the CoCo, the AI coding assistant from Snowflake, is able to create an end-to-end pipeline to read data from Faker and write it into a final table and generated a view with the help of Snowpipe streaming. It ingested the data. So to do this, typically it takes about couple of hours to days, but in this case, it is able to do it within, I would say, just less than 10 minutes. So everything is working end to end. If I want to run manually, I also have a Python ingest product.py script. So anytime to stream more data. So dynamic table is already there, that will just refresh automatically. So I'm going to now close this session. So thanks, CoCo. This is helpful. Suspend all the running processes in dynamic table as well. So I'm going to say CoCo that suspend all the running process if there are any, and I don't want to use any of the warehouse that if dynamic table continue to run every 1 minute, right? I want it to stop as well. So CoCo is going to suspend all the running process now. So with that, I'm going to end the this demo. So the main goal of this demo is to use the CoCo to build an end-to-end pipeline, and we were able to achieve that.